Dead America, Tales from Las Vegas, The Bodyguard, by Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. The late-night breeze hit Connor in the face as he sat in the small boat in the middle of Lake Las Vegas. The events of the last few hours had left him shaken, from losing the 3 other members of his team while protecting their client, Sammy Torino, to the betrayal by that very same man after getting him home safely. Connor's wet clothes clung to him, the cool air sending a chill through him as they gripped his large muscular frame. Water still dripped from his jacket, each drop creating ripples that caught the moonlight before disappearing into the dark water. His boots were waterlogged, heavy as concrete blocks, and his handgun sat uncomfortably against his hip where the holster had twisted. He glanced back toward the shores of the exclusive housing development just behind him. The lights from the mansions reflected off the water like stars, mocking him with their promise of safety and comfort. Somewhere in there, Sammy was probably pouring himself another expensive scotch, congratulating himself on saving a few dollars by having his bodyguard executed. His first instinct was to paddle the boat back, go to Sammy's house, and send every bullet left in his handgun's magazine into his face. The longer he thought about it, the better it sounded. His hands tightened on the oars, knuckles going white. Angelo, Tony, Jimmy, all dead because of that ungrateful bastard. And now Sammy wanted to add him to the list, just to save face. Connor forced himself to start talking, his voice barely above a whisper in the darkness. "Don't be an idiot. He's got a small army guarding him. You'd be lucky to even make it to his house, let alone get inside." Connor let out a frustrated grunt, knowing that he was right. The image of those assault rifles pointed at him was still fresh. Military-grade weapons in the hands of trained operators. Even if he got lucky and took down 1 or 2, the others would cut him down before he got within 50 feet of Sammy. Besides, Landry did you a solid by letting you live. Seems like it would be a dick move to betray him. The words tasted bitter, but they were true. Landry had taken a risk, probably a significant one. If Sammy found out his execution order hadn't been carried out, Landry would be the next one taking a midnight swim with a bullet in his head. The man had shown him professional courtesy, maybe even respect. That was worth something, even in this a nightmare. Connor let out a sigh, looking ahead toward the docks. In the moonlight, he could make out 6 zombies milling around the wooden planks, their movements jerky and unnatural. They wandered aimlessly, occasionally bumping into each other or the posts, as if they were just biding their times until he showed back up. Well, the night isn't getting any younger. Might as well get this over with. Connor dipped the oars back into the water, pulling with steady strokes. He tried his best to minimize the noise, lifting the paddles carefully to avoid splashing, but the subtle laps on the water carried in the still night air. One creature near the edge of the docks turned its head sharply toward the sound. Even from this distance, Connor could see its vacant eyes lock onto him. The ghoul let out a moan that echoed across the water, a sound that made Connor's skin crawl despite everything he'd already witnessed. Without hesitation, the creature broke into that inhuman sprint, its feet pounding on the wooden dock with thunderous impacts. Connor watched as the ghoul ran straight off the edge of the dock, its momentum carrying it several feet through the air before it splashed down hard. Water erupted around the impact site. The creature thrashed about for several moments, its arms flailing wildly, making a racket that would have been comical if it wasn't so disturbing. Its moans became gurgles, then bubbles, then nothing as it sank beneath the dark surface for good. Connor slowed the boat down, putting his paddle deep in the water and letting the resistance do all the work. The small craft gradually lost momentum, coming to rest about 10 yards from the dock. He sat perfectly still, watching as one more creature was drawn toward him by the previous one's dramatic exit. This zombie moved differently, more cautiously somehow. It approached the edge of the dock at that terrifying sprint, but slowed as it reached the end. The bodyguard stared at the creature, silently hoping that it would follow the first one's lead and take an involuntary swim. Much to his dismay, the ghoul stopped right at the edge. Its head swiveled back and forth, scanning the area with those dead eyes. Connor remained motionless, barely breathing. "Come on, why aren't you taking a dip?" Connor watched the zombie look around, its movements becoming less agitated, more confused. It took a few moments of careful observation before the bodyguard realized what was happening. The creature had lost sight of him in the darkness. Without active movement or sound to track, he'd become invisible to it. Well, here goes nothing. Connor lifted his oar up high, bringing it down hard on the water's surface. The smack echoed across the lake like a gunshot. In an instant, the creature on shore let out an excited moan, its dead eyes locking onto the source of the sound. It immediately set off into a sprint, arms outstretched, reaching for prey it couldn't quite see. The bodyguard watched with grim satisfaction as the ghoul ran right off the edge of the dock. This one hit the water face first, the impact probably breaking its nose if such things mattered to the dead. It went under in an instant, barely making a splash as it vanished beneath the waterline. Connor began nodding to himself, a plan forming. I like this idea a lot better than trying to fight these things. Connor lifted his paddle up again, but this time he brought it down hard on the edge of the boat itself. The metallic ping from the impact rang out clearly, the sound carrying much further than the water splash. The remaining zombies on the dock all turned in unison, their heads snapping toward him like hunting dogs catching a scent. In a flash, they were all sprinting toward him, their feet creating a thunderous drumbeat on the wooden dock. They moved as a pack, shoving against each other in their desperation to reach him. Connor watched with dark satisfaction as the first one went over, then the second, then all of them in a grotesque lemming-like procession. Each splash was followed by brief thrashing, then silence as the lake claimed them. Connor gave it a few moments, counting slowly to 30 in his head, making sure they were fully submerged and weren't going to somehow crawl back up. The water had returned to its glassy calm, with only a few bubbles breaking the surface to mark where the creatures had gone under. He began paddling the rest of the way to shore, keeping his movement smooth and quiet in case any stragglers remained. He hopped up onto the dock, his waterlogged boots making a squelching sound on the wood. Water streamed from his clothes, creating dark puddles that reflected the moonlight. He drew his handgun, holding it ready as he moved back onto solid land. His eyes swept the parking area, checking behind cars, scanning the shadows near the trees. Relief washed over him when he found no movement, no moaning, no shuffling feet. Connor walked back toward the truck that had brought them from the horrors of the city, his wet clothes making every step uncomfortable. He patted his pocket, feeling 2 sets of keys through the wet fabric, one for the truck, the other for Landry's apartment. The metal was cold against his fingers as he pulled them out. 615 Wintergreen Drive, apartment 3C. He repeated the address like a mantra, committing it to memory. Connor stood by the truck for a moment, running through the idea of taking refuge there. It wasn't his place, which felt wrong somehow. Using another man's home while he was stuck dealing with Sammy's paranoid orders. But what choice did he have? It's not like you're going to be able to make it home. You're going to be lucky to make it a few miles, let alone all the way up to the north side. The north side of Vegas might as well have been on the moon. Between here and there lay the Strip downtown, countless neighborhoods that were probably swarming with those things by now. His own apartment, his things, his life, all impossibly out of reach. Connor climbed into the truck, grimacing as his wet clothes soaked into the fabric seat. He looked around the cab for a moment, opening up the glove box and rummaging through the contents. Registration papers, napkins from a drive-thru, a tire pressure gauge, nothing useful. He pulled open the center console, digging through loose change and old receipts. There we go. Connor pulled out a GPS system, one of those portable units that people used before smartphones took over everything. He powered it on, waiting for it to acquire satellites, then punched in the address. The small screen lit up with a route, showing just a few miles to the apartment complex. A straight shot down quiet residential streets. But before heading out, he stared at the device intently, thinking aloud. Landry said he had a week's worth of food at the apartment. You know what you've seen tonight. Do you really think this is going to be contained in a week? Connor let out a deep sigh, already knowing the answer. This wasn't some isolated incident that the authorities would clean up by morning. This was spreading fast, maybe already out of control. In a week, the city might be completely overrun. Hell, it might be overrun by dawn. He grabbed the GPS device again, typing in grocery stores into the search function. The screen populated with results, and he studied them carefully. The closest was a supercenter, one of those massive 24-hour operations that sold everything from groceries to garden supplies. It was on the way to the apartment, just a minor detour. Well, the bad news is it's open 24 hours a day. The good news is it's in a wealthy part of town, so I can't imagine too many of these fancy-ass people would be caught dead in a store like that. The irony of his word choice wasn't lost on him. Caught dead. After tonight, that phrase would never sound the same. Connor stared at the GPS device for another few seconds, weighing his options. The smart play was to go straight to the apartment, lock the door, and wait for dawn to see how bad things really were. But if the stores were cleaned out by morning, if this really was as bad as he feared, then he'd be trapped with whatever Landry had in his kitchen. This is such a bad idea. However, it would be nice to be able to eat next week. Connor started up the truck, the engine turning over smoothly. He threw it into gear, turning around on the narrow road and heading back towards civilization. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. Empty roads stretched before him, but he knew that wouldn't last. Somewhere between here and the supercenter, he'd run into more of those things. Maybe a few, maybe hundreds. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he drove into the night, toward what he hoped would be a quick, uneventful supply run. Even though he knew that most likely wasn't going to be the case. Nothing about this night had been easy. Why would that change now? The truck rumbled through the empty streets, carrying Connor toward whatever fresh hell awaited him at the supercenter. Chapter 2. Connor drove quickly down the darkened streets, which were mostly abandoned. The pickup truck's headlights swept across empty driveways and dark windows. To either side of him were moderately wealthy neighborhoods, their manicured lawns and decorative walls creating an illusion of normalcy. The houses sat silent, though whether their occupants were hiding, fled, or worse, he couldn't tell. He kept his focus straight ahead, hands steady on the wheel, making sure nothing darted out in front of him. The last thing he needed was to slam into a zombie and disable his only transportation. Still, he occasionally caught movement out of the corner of his eyes, shadows darting between houses, curtains twitching in windows, the occasional figure stumbling through a yard. The GPS unit chirped from its mount on the dashboard, the electronic voice cutting through the silence. Turn left at the next intersection. Connor slowed down, easing off the gas as he approached the turn. He checked both ways carefully, scanning for any sign of movement or a speeding car that could take him out. The intersection was clear, just empty asphalt reflecting the streetlights. He made the turn, accelerating smoothly as he straightened out. 2 blocks up, the supercenter sign rose into the night sky, its bright letters illuminated like a beacon. The massive parking lot stretched out before it, mostly empty except for the light poles, creating pools of yellow light in the darkness. Come on, just once let it be quiet," Connor muttered to himself. The bodyguard continued his silent mantra as he drove up to the parking lot entrance, but curses quickly replaced his hopefulness. 6 cars were scattered across the lot. At least it wasn't packed, but any people meant potential problems, either survivors who might be desperate and dangerous, or worse, infected who'd turned. "Well, it could be worse," Connor said under his breath. As Connor pulled into the parking lot, movement near the store entrance caught his attention. Several people burst through the automatic doors, running at full speed. At first, his hand went to his handgun, thinking they might be zombies, but he relaxed slightly when he saw them carrying goods in their hands. Cases of water, bags of food, what looked like camping equipment. Looters, not infected. He sat there for a moment, engine idling, studying the scene carefully. The people moved with purpose and fear, like something was chasing them, constantly looking back over their shoulders as they ran. Tires squealed as they peeled out, racing toward the exit, but notably, nothing followed them out of the store. No zombies came charging through those doors in pursuit. "It's now or never, man. Get moving," Connor told himself. Connor willed himself to hit the gas on the truck, the engine responding immediately. He picked up speed, heading straight for the front of the store rather than parking further away. He brought the truck to a stop just a few yards shy of the entrance, close enough for a quick escape if needed. Connor checked his handgun, ejecting the magazine to verify his round count before slapping it back in. 13 in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. He had one more full magazine after this. Not much if things went sideways. The bodyguard opened the door slowly, trying to minimize noise. His wet boots squelched as they hit the asphalt, water still squishing between his toes with each step. He kept his weapon low but ready, finger alongside the trigger guard, barrel pointed at the ground, but ready for a quick draw if the situation required it. The automatic doors were stuck open, undoubtedly knocked open by fleeing patrons. Through the entrance, he could see overturned displays and scattered merchandise. The bright fluorescent lights inside created a stark contrast to the darkness outside, making it impossible to see details until his eyes adjusted. Just before Connor could reach the threshold, a panicked woman burst through the entrance, nearly colliding with him. She was screaming her head off, her voice raw with terror, pleading for help that wasn't coming. Her shirt was torn at the shoulder, and she clutched a purse against her chest like a shield. She didn't even seem to see Connor, her eyes wide with blind panic as she ran past him into the night. A second later, he caught a glimpse of what was chasing her, a bloodied zombie in what had been a supercenter uniform, its blue vest torn and stained dark. The creature moved with that horrifying speed, arms outstretched, fingers grasping at air where the woman had been moments before. The bodyguard reacted on instinct, his training taking over. He darted forward, lowering his shoulder and driving it into the side of the creature as it exited the building. The impact was solid, Connor's considerable mass and momentum combining with the zombie's forward motion. The creature flew sideways, completely off balance, its feet leaving the ground before it landed hard on the asphalt with a sickening crunch. The woman continued running, not bothering to look back, her screams fading into the distance as she disappeared into the darkness. Connor didn't wait to see if she made it to safety. He pounced on the creature before it could recover, driving his knee into its back with his full weight. The zombie thrashed beneath him, trying to turn its head to bite, but Connor had leverage. He raised his handgun, gripping it by the barrel, and brought the butt down on the creature's skull. The first impact created a dull thud. The second caused a crack. By the fourth strike, the zombie had stopped moving, dark blood pooling beneath its head on the asphalt. Connor pushed himself to his feet, spinning around with his handgun raised properly now, scanning for anything coming his way. The parking lot remained empty, but from just inside the store, he could hear someone pleading for help. The voice was high, desperate, and very much human. After seeing nothing directly in front of him, he inched forward through the entrance, keeping his head on a swivel. The entry area was a disaster. Shopping carts overturned, a display of seasonal items scattered across the floor, and bloody handprints on the walls. The metallic smell of blood mixed with the artificial air freshener the store always pumped through the vents. The sounds of pleading continued from his left, just inside the door where the checkout lanes began. Connor carefully poked his head around the corner, weapon ready. A young cashier with bright red hair was kneeling beside an injured coworker near register 3. She had both hands pressed against the person's neck, blood seeping between her fingers despite the pressure. Her supercenter vest was soaked with blood. Whether hers or her coworkers, Connor couldn't tell. She continued yelling out, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, someone help me!" the young woman cried. The woman couldn't have been more than 20, with a slight frame that looked like a stiff breeze would send her flying. Pale skin made paler by the fluorescent lights, freckles across her nose, and that shocking red hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come partially loose. Despite her small stature, she remained at her coworker's side, pressing down with all her might, willing them to live. "Somebody help me!" she screamed again. Connor stared at the panicked young woman for a few seconds, his mind running through the situation. The smart play was to grab supplies and get out. Don't get involved, don't play hero. He'd already lost 3 friends tonight trying to protect someone else. But something about her determination, the way she refused to abandon her coworker despite the obvious danger, struck a chord. "Damn it, man," Connor muttered under his breath. Connor started moving toward her, keeping his weapon ready, checking the aisles as he passed them. Each one could hide a threat, but they all appeared empty. Just scattered products and overturned displays. He got within 10 yards of her when movement in his peripheral vision made him freeze. A zombie burst from behind an end cap display to his right, running straight for the young woman. She was oblivious to the threat, focused entirely on her dying co-worker. The creature was maybe 30 feet away and closing fast. Connor reacted swiftly, muscle memory from countless hours at the range taking over. He raised his handgun in one smooth motion, acquired the target, and squeezed off a single shot. The crack of the weapon was loud in the enclosed space. The bullet caught the zombie in the side of the head, just above the ear. It crumpled instantly, momentum carrying the body forward in a slide across the polished floor. It came to rest just a few feet from the terrified young woman. She fell back into a seated position at the sound of the gunshot, her hands finally leaving her co-worker's wound. Blood covered her arms up to the elbows. She began scrambling backward, crab-walking away from both the newly dead zombie and Connor. Her name tag, crooked but still attached to her vest, read Ruby in black letters. "Please don't hurt me," Ruby cried out. Connor went into a non-threatening stance, raising his hands with his palms out, making sure the gun wasn't aimed anywhere near her. He kept his voice calm and steady, the same tone he'd used to de-escalate situations at bars and clubs. "It's okay, I'm not gonna hurt you. But that guy was, so I did what I had to do," Connor said. Ruby's eyes darted to the body on the ground, and recognition flashed across her face. She nodded slowly, her voice shaky. "That was the guy. He attacked my friend," Ruby said. Ruby nodded toward the person on the ground. Connor could see from here that it was too late. The coworker was motionless, eyes staring at nothing, the blood pool no longer spreading because the heart had stopped pumping. The bite wound on the neck was severe, probably hit an artery. The bodyguard moved swiftly over to Ruby, reaching down to pull her up by the arm. She was light, weighing practically nothing as he lifted her to her feet. He immediately positioned himself between her and her co-worker's body. "What are you doing?" "They need our help," Ruby protested. "Your co-worker is gone," Connor said firmly. Connor raised his handgun, aiming it at the body on the ground. Ruby's eyes went wide with horror. "What are you doing?" Ruby shouted. "I'm sorry, but your friend is about to turn into whatever that guy was that attacked them," Connor explained. "What are you talking about?" "That makes no sense," Ruby said. Ruby tried to push around Connor, but he held her back with his free arm. She was stronger than she looked, fighting against his grip, but he was considerably larger and kept her in place. "Look at them, they're dead. Now just wait," Connor said. Connor gripped Ruby tightly, his arm across her midsection, preventing her from moving forward. Her gaze never broke from her coworker on the ground. After a few seconds, it started, fingers twitching, then the hand, then the whole arm. The movement spread through the rest of the body in a matter of seconds, jerky and unnatural. Ruby stared in disbelief, her body going rigid against Connor's arm. Fear radiated from her in waves. What is happening?" Ruby whispered. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the relative quiet of the store, it was enough. The zombified co-worker's head snapped toward the sound. It scrambled to its feet with that unnatural speed, limbs moving in ways that seemed to ignore normal human limitations. It rushed toward them, mouth open, teeth bared. Connor's aim was already in place. A single shot to the head, and the creature dropped, truly dead this time. The body hit the floor with a wet thud, blood and brain matter painting the white tiles. Ruby let out a silent scream, her mouth open but no sound coming out, her vocal cords paralyzed by terror. She stared at the body for several seconds, her whole body trembling. Connor turned her around, grabbing her by both shoulders. He gave her a gentle shake to get her attention, then looked directly into her eyes. He glanced down at her name tag to confirm what he'd read before speaking. "Ruby, I need you to listen to me. You need to get out of here and get someplace safe. Can you do that?" Connor asked. Ruby was still in shock, her green eyes unfocused, but she managed a soft nod. Before she could form words, they both heard multiple footsteps coming from the front of the store. Both turned toward the entrance, Connor raising his weapon, prepared for the worst. 4 people walked through the entrance, 3 men and a woman, all carrying empty bags and backpacks. They looked like regular people, not infected, though their clothes suggested they'd been through their own troubles tonight. Connor lowered his weapon slightly but kept it ready. Unable to process the horror around her, Ruby's mind seemed to snap back into work mode, some kind of protective autopilot taking over. She pulled away from Connor and walked toward the group. 3 of them ran deeper into the store, heading for the grocery section, while one man lingered at the entrance, scanning the checkout area with calculating eyes. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're closed." "You need to leave right now," Ruby said. The man didn't take her order well. He turned to face Ruby fully, his expression shifting from annoyance to anger. He raised his hand, middle finger extended, flipping Ruby off before walking further into the store with deliberate disrespect. Ruby chased after him, her voice rising with a mix of fear and indignation. "I said we're closed," Ruby insisted. The man stopped dead in his tracks, spinning around with surprising speed. He placed his hand on Ruby's face, fingers spread across her cheek and forehead. With a forceful shove, he sent the young woman tumbling backward. She hit the ground hard, her elbow scraping on the floor. "Shut the hell up! Ain't nobody talking to you," the man snarled. "Maybe not, but you're going to talk to me, asshole," Connor said. The man looked over to see Connor with his handgun pointed directly at him. For added effect, Connor thumbed back the hammer, the metallic click echoing in the space. The man flinched at the sound, his bravado evaporating instantly. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble," the man said quickly. "You should have thought about that before knocking her down," Connor replied. Connor walked over to Ruby, keeping his handgun trained on the man the entire time. He never broke eye contact, making it clear that he wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. He reached down with his free hand, helping Ruby to her feet. She was shaking, more from adrenaline than injury. He gently pushed her behind him, using his body as a shield. "So what? Are you going to shoot me?" the man asked. "If you lay hands on her again, I'll put a round in your knee." Which, based on the look in your eyes, I'm assuming you know it's a death sentence with what's going on out here tonight, Connor said coldly. The man's expression changed as he processed the threat. He glanced at Connor's steady grip on the weapon, the bodies on the floor, the blood everywhere. He gave a contemplative nod, understanding that this wasn't a bluff. Once Connor realized the man wasn't going to be a problem, he lowered his gun slightly, though he kept it ready. "Good. Now that we're clear about what you're not going to do," Connor said. Connor paused for a second, letting the threat sink in before continuing. "Now get out of here. Go catch up with your friends. Get what you can and get someplace safe," Connor ordered. The man gave Connor a respectful nod, the kind that said he understood who was in charge. He turned and jogged deeper into the store, heading in the direction his companions had gone. Ruby came around from behind Connor, giving him a confused, almost agitated look. Her face was flushed, whether from the fall or indignation, he couldn't tell. "Why did you tell him to loot the place with his friends?" Ruby asked. "Because that's exactly what we're gonna do," Connor said. Ruby stared at the bodyguard in disbelief, her mouth opening and closing as she processed his words. "You can't be serious," Ruby said. "What just happened to your friend is happening all over the city. There's thousands of those things out there, which means we need to get someplace safe. Now I'm getting as much food as I can carry and getting the hell out of Dodge. And I suggest you do the same," Connor explained. Ruby's expression shifted from disbelief to panic, then to something more desperate and pleading. Her voice became very small. I don't have a car," Ruby said quietly. Connor watched as the young woman began breaking down, the weight of everything finally crashing over her. Tears streamed down her face as sobs racked her small frame. The moment had overwhelmed her. Her co-workers dead, the world falling apart, and now she was stranded with no way to escape. Against his better judgment, knowing he should just leave her and focus on his own survival, Connor put his hand on her shoulder. The gesture was meant to be comforting, though his hand nearly covered her entire shoulder. "You can ride with me, but we have to move now," Connor said. Ruby looked up at him through tear-filled eyes, hope breaking through the despair. She nodded quickly. "Thank you," Ruby said. "The name's Connor. And you can thank me by picking up the pace. Come on." Chapter 3. Connor and Ruby moved quickly down the aisle of the supercenter, the bodyguard standing tall and striding with purpose, while the cashier looked a lot less sure of herself. Her steps were shorter, more hesitant, and she kept glancing back over her shoulder as if expecting something to chase them. As they reached the end of the aisle, Connor spotted a rack of plastic shopping bags hanging from a hook. He reached over and grabbed a handful of the large ones, the plastic crinkling loudly in the quiet store. He tossed some back to Ruby, who caught them awkwardly, nearly dropping one. Load it up with as much food as you can. Shelf stable with as much protein as you can get, Connor instructed. Okay, I can do that. We should hit aisle 3. That's the dried beans and rice, Ruby suggested. Connor nodded and led them through the back aisle toward the target. Their footsteps echoed on the polished floor, and every sound seemed amplified in the eerie quiet. Other than the distant hum of refrigeration units and the buzz of lights, the store was unnaturally silent. No background music, no chatter from other shoppers, no beeping from registers. As they made the turn into aisle 3, they spotted piles of red and black beans stacked up on the right side. The bags were hefty, 5 and 10-pound varieties that would last weeks if rationed properly. On the left side, various types of rice filled the shelves: white, brown, jasmine, basmati. You start getting those, I'll grab some rice, Connor said. There's some sauces on the end cap, Ruby pointed out. Connor's first thought was to dismiss the suggestion. They needed calories and protein, not condiments. But he quickly realized it was a good idea. Plain beans and rice would keep them alive, but after a few days, the monotony would become its own kind of torture. A little sauce never hurt anybody. Besides, if I have to eat this stuff for weeks on end, I'm going to need some flavor, Connor thought to himself. The two of them spent the next several minutes loading up as many bags as they could carry. Connor worked methodically, grabbing the largest bags of rice first, then filling in the gaps with smaller packages. He added bottles of soy sauce, hot sauce, and teriyaki from the end cap display. Ruby focused on the beans, mixing varieties: kidney, pinto, black, navy. She also grabbed several packages of lentils and split peas. Connor had 4 bags thrown over his shoulders, the plastic handles digging into his muscles, even through his jacket. The weight was substantial, probably 60 pounds total. Ruby had 3 bags, and when she stood up with them, she nearly toppled over backward. The weight shift caught her off guard, and she had to take a quick step to steady herself. "Are you good?" Connor asked. Ruby nodded, adjusting her grip on the bags. "Yeah, just got a little off balance there," Ruby said. "Come on, we need to get to my truck," Connor said. The two of them turned to walk toward the front entrance, but froze when they heard screams coming from that direction. The sound was high-pitched, terrified, and cut off abruptly. Connor pulled his handgun, aiming it toward the top of the aisle. He moved slightly forward, using the edge of the shelf as cover. A few seconds later, he spotted a lone creature walking across the gap between aisles. It moved with that distinctive shambling gait, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Blood covered its mouth and chin, dripping onto its torn shirt. The zombie paused for a moment, as if sensing something, then continued on its way. Connor motioned for Ruby to begin backing up slowly, which she did, trying to keep the plastic bags from rustling. The bodyguard kept his handgun trained on the spot where the creature had been, only lowering it after the zombie vanished around the next aisle. Connor turned and picked up the pace, motioning for Ruby to do the same. Her shorter legs had to work harder to keep up, and the bags bounced against her legs with each step. As they reached the back aisle, they heard another scream coming from the right, this one closer and followed by the sound of shelves crashing over. The noise forced them to go left, away from both the scream and their original destination. Connor moved quickly, overtaking Ruby to take the lead. He kept his handgun raised, sweeping it back and forth as they heard moaning and running footsteps throughout the store. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the high ceiling and making it impossible to pinpoint locations. They got halfway down the back aisle before Connor spotted the sporting goods section. A sign hanging from the ceiling read, "Sporting goods, camping, hunting," in bold letters. He stopped abruptly, causing Ruby to nearly run into his back. He walked up a few yards into the aisle and grabbed a short aluminum baseball bat off a display rack. It was a youth model, lighter and shorter than regulation, perfect for close quarters. He kept it in his offhand, testing its weight with a few practice swings. He didn't have to wait long to use it. A zombie came walking out from the next aisle, emerging from behind a display of camping chairs. It was an older woman, maybe 60, still wearing her reading glasses, though one lens was cracked. She turned toward them, mouth opening in a moan. Connor stepped forward with a forceful downward swing, catching the creature on the top of the head. The aluminum bat connected with a metallic ring, and the impact was enough to crack the skull. The zombie's legs gave out instantly, and it tumbled to the ground in a heap. Unfortunately for the duo, the ghoul's arms flailed as it fell, smacking against an end cap display. Its dead weight pulled down an entire pyramid of soda cans. They crashed to the floor in a tremendous cascade, the clattering echoing throughout the store like thunder. Cans rolled in every direction, some bursting open and spraying sticky liquid across the tiles. "Damn it!" Connor cursed. "Aisle 16!" Ruby said urgently. Connor was confused, glancing back at Ruby, who was pointing frantically toward a distant aisle. He followed her gesture and looked up at the hanging signs, spotting a small one that read "Hunting" above aisle 16, which was a few aisles down. Understanding immediately, he began running without thinking about it, keeping his handgun raised and ready. Connor got them to aisle 16, his boots splashing through the spilled soda as he came around the corner. The scene that greeted them was gruesome. 2 zombies were crouched on the floor, feeding on a poor soul who'd had the same idea Ruby had, going for better weapons. The victim was a middle-aged man in camouflage clothing, and the zombies were tearing into his midsection with their hands and teeth. The bodyguard looked past the feeding frenzy, hoping to spot something useful. The fallen man had managed to get a hunting shotgun off the rack before being overwhelmed. It lay just a few feet from his outstretched hand, and a box of shells sat on the counter beside it, the cardboard torn open. Before Connor could formulate a plan, one of the feeding creatures looked up from its meal. Gore dripped from its mouth, and its dead eyes locked onto them with predatory focus. It let out an excited moan, alerting its companion. Connor dropped the bat, the aluminum clanging on the floor. He brought both hands to his gun, taking a proper shooting stance. He aimed carefully, knowing he couldn't afford to waste ammunition, and pulled the trigger. The bullet caught the first zombie square in the forehead, dropping it across the victim's legs. The other zombie broke away from its meal, apparently desiring something fresher. It scrambled to its feet with that unnatural quickness, but only made it 2 steps before Connor put a round through its forehead as well. It collapsed backward, crashing into a display of camping knives. The duo could hear moans throughout the store now, accompanied by running footsteps converging on their position. The noise from the soda cans and gunshots had drawn every zombie in the building. "Get behind the counter," Connor commanded. Connor and Ruby ran hard up the aisle, their bags of supplies bouncing wildly. The sporting goods counter was built like a fortress, solid wood construction with reinforced glass display cases showing various knives and ammunition. Connor stopped beside the counter and grabbed Ruby around the waist, helping lift her over it. She practically flew over, landing hard on the other side. While it wasn't a ton of protection, the counter was enclosed on all sides except for a small opening at the top, where employees would stand to help customers. It would have to do. Connor vaulted over the counter just as the first zombie emerged from the back aisle. The creature locked onto them, its head snapping in their direction. It picked up speed, arms outstretched, fingers grasping. Ruby let out a scream as the creature slammed into the counter with enough force to crack the display glass. Spiderweb fractures spread from the impact point, but the glass held. The zombie clawed at the barrier, unable to reach them, but unwilling to give up. Connor grabbed the weapon off the counter, his hands working automatically to check it out. It was a hunting shotgun, and he could feel the weight that told him it was loaded. He brought it to his shoulder, aimed at point-blank range, and fired. The zombie's head simply vanished, vaporized in a spray of gore that painted the shelves red. "Shells? I need shells," Connor said urgently. Ruby nodded, immediately understanding. She began digging through the back shelves behind the counter, pushing aside boxes of various calibers. Her hands were shaking, making it hard to read the labels. Meanwhile, Connor grabbed the half-empty box on the counter, the one the dead man had opened. He loaded shells into the shotgun's magazine tube as fast as his fingers could work, the red plastic casing sliding in smoothly. A moment later, 3 more zombies emerged from the back aisle, having heard the shotgun blast. They raced toward the counter in that horrible sprint, their feet slipping slightly on the blood-slicked floor. Rather than fire from a distance and risk missing, Connor waited. He let them get close, let them slam into the display case. Ruby pressed her hands over her ears as Connor made short work of the creatures. The first shotgun blast took the lead zombie's head clean off at the jawline. He worked the pump action smoothly, the spent shell ejecting with a metallic clink. The second shot caught the next zombie center mass in the face, dropping it instantly. Pump, aim, fire. The third zombie's head disappeared in a red mist. One by one, their heads vanished in a gruesome display that left the floor in front of the counter looking like a slaughterhouse. Connor loaded in more shells, replacing the spent ones as he stood sentinel, looking out across the store. His ears rang from the gunshots in the enclosed space. He could hear moans and movement coming from elsewhere in the store, footsteps and crashes, but couldn't see anything coming their way. The zombies seemed to be searching, drawn by the noise, but not sure exactly where it had come from. "Keep your eyes peeled for those things," Connor said. Ruby nodded, positioning herself to watch the sides while Connor watched the front. He grabbed a large shopping bag that was sitting by the register. Working quickly but quietly, he loaded it up with the boxes of shotgun shells that Ruby had pulled out. After the bag was full, he crammed it into one of the canvas bags filled with food, having to rearrange some rice bags to make it fit. He kept the shotgun ready, checking the ammo one more time. "We're going to move fast, so stay on my ass. We're getting to the front wall and going out the front door. My truck is just to the right of the entrance," Connor explained. Ruby shook her head violently from side to side, her red ponytail whipping back and forth. "Look, I know you're scared, but—" Connor began. Ruby put her hand up, cutting him off. She took a breath to steady herself before speaking. "There's a fire exit to the right. We can go out that and come around to the front that way," Ruby said. "Won't that set off an alarm?" Connor asked. "Yeah, but it's every alarm in the building. If those people run to the noise, they won't know where to go," Ruby explained. Connor thought about it for a second. It was smart thinking. The fire alarm would create chaos, maybe draw the zombies away from their actual exit point. He nodded in agreement. "Okay, let's do it," Connor said. The two of them slipped out from behind the counter, Connor going first with the shotgun raised. Ruby followed, clutching her bags of supplies. They moved carefully, Connor keeping the hunting shotgun raised and ready as they advanced. They went to the top of the aisle, and Connor did a quick peek both ways before emerging from cover. The front aisle looked clear in both directions, though he could see movement in the distance, shadows passing between aisles. They stepped out, turning right toward where Ruby had indicated the fire exit would be. They barely got 2 steps before they heard moaning coming from behind them. Connor looked over his shoulder, his heart sinking, as he spotted half a dozen creatures running at them from the middle of the store. They must have been drawn by the shotgun blasts, searching aisle by aisle until they found the source. "Get to the door!" Connor shouted. Ruby took off running, the fire exit 20 yards ahead. It was marked with a glowing red exit sign and a push bar across the middle. Connor spun around, bringing the shotgun up. He fired off 2 rounds in quick succession. The first hit the lead zombie square in the chest, the slug tearing a massive hole but not stopping it. The second shot hit the one just beside it in the shoulder, spinning it around. The impacts of both were enough to stagger them, causing the others to run into them from behind. The collision created a pileup of tangled limbs and bodies, buying precious seconds. Connor turned and ran hard for the door, pumping his legs as fast as they would go. Ruby had reached the door but waited for him, not wanting to go outside into potential danger without backup. Her hand hovered over the push bar, ready to slam through the moment he arrived. As Connor reached her, he nodded, and together they plowed through the door. The instant the door opened, alarms began blaring throughout the building. The sound was deafening, a continuous electronic wail that seemed to come from every direction at once. Emergency lights began flashing, strobing red and white. The two of them got outside into the cool night air, quickly slamming the door shut behind them. The heavy metal door did nothing to quiet the alarm, which they could hear even outside. Connor led them along the building's exterior wall, moving toward the front of the store. They stopped at the corner, and Connor carefully peered around toward where his truck was parked. The scene was chaotic. There was a lot of commotion by the front entrance, zombies feasting on a couple of people who had tried to flee but weren't fast enough. The victims were still moving weakly, trying to crawl away even as the creatures tore into them. Other zombies were walking around aimlessly, heads turning at every sound, looking for their own targets. Some were drawn to the muffled fire alarm coming from inside, pressing against the glass doors. Others wandered the parking lot, investigating abandoned cars. Connor motioned for Ruby to stay quiet and move along the wall, hoping that the building's shadow would conceal their advance. The moon was behind clouds now, providing some additional cover. The duo moved slowly, placing each foot carefully to avoid scuffing on the pavement. It took them a tense minute to reach the truck, using it as cover to block them from the zombies just a few yards away on the other side. They could hear the wet sounds of feeding, flesh being torn, bones cracking, the grotesque chewing and swallowing. Connor fought down his revulsion and focused on the task at hand. He used hand signals to communicate with Ruby, pointing to himself, then the driver's door, then to her, making a climbing motion. She nodded understanding. When he opened the driver's side door, she should get in and climb over to the passenger side. Connor led them around to the driver's side, keeping low to avoid being seen through the windows. He reached up slowly, gently pulling on the door handle. The door opened with a soft click, and he pulled it wider, creating enough space for Ruby to slip inside. She moved quickly but quietly, tossing her bags in first, then climbing up into the cab. Connor quickly followed, shoving his bags of supplies into the middle of the cab, the plastic crinkling despite his efforts to be quiet. He slid into the driver's seat, gently pulling the door closed until it latched, not fully shut but enough. Connor turned the key, the engine roaring to life. The sound got the attention of every creature nearby. Heads snapped toward them, and excited moans filled the air. "Get us out of here!" Ruby yelled. Connor threw the truck into reverse, slamming the gas pedal down. The tires squealed as they spun, searching for traction before catching and launching them backward. Several zombies were already running at them, but Connor spun the wheel hard, executing a reverse U-turn that had the truck sliding sideways before the front swung around to point toward the exit. He shifted into drive and floored it. The back tires squealed again, smoking slightly before gaining traction. The truck shot forward, engine roaring. In a flash, they were back onto the road, leaving the supercenter and its horrors behind. Ruby looked back through the rear window. A dozen zombies were giving chase, running after them with unbelievable speed, but they were losing ground by the second. Within moments, the creatures were just shadows in the distance, then nothing at all. "Are you okay?" Connor asked. "Yeah, I am. I'm just—" Ruby began, then trailed off. The young woman seemed unable to find words for what she'd just experienced. How could anyone describe watching their coworkers die and return as monsters? How could she process that the world she knew had ended in a single shift at work? "Trust me, I know," Connor said. Ruby let out a small smile, nodding. Neither of them had the ability to put into words the horror they were experiencing. However, it was comforting to her to know that she wasn't alone in this nightmare. Chapter 4. Connor drove the duo down the street, taking turns at each of the next 4 intersections to make sure the mob of creatures following them wouldn't be able to keep track of them. Right, left, right. A random pattern designed to break line of sight and confuse any pursuit. The truck's engine growled with each acceleration, tires chirping slightly on the sharper turns. After the 4th turn, he slowed down to a stop, pulling into a vacant lot between a closed dry cleaner and an abandoned restaurant. The gravel crunched under the truck's tires as he put it in park, leaving the engine running. The headlights illuminated weeds growing through cracks in the asphalt, a shopping cart on its side, and a sun-bleached real estate sign advertising future development that would probably never come now. "What are you doing?" Ruby asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "There's no point in continuing to drive if I don't know where I'm going," Connor explained. "You don't know where you're going?" Ruby asked, confusion evident in her voice. "I don't know where you live, so I don't know where to take you," Connor said. The words hit Ruby like a physical blow. Her eyes began to well up, tears streaming down her face as she started to go into a panic attack. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, her hands trembling as the reality of her situation crashed over her. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, in the middle of an apocalypse. Connor sat frozen for a moment, his hands still on the steering wheel, not knowing how to react. He'd dealt with aggressive drunks, violent criminals, and now zombies, but a crying young woman was outside his expertise. His training hadn't covered this. "It's okay, just take a deep breath," Connor said, trying to keep his voice steady and calm. Ruby tried to gather herself, sucking in air, but she just couldn't control it. Within moments, she devolved into full-blown hysterics, crying, shaking, her whole body trembling as she lost control. The The tears came in waves, and she pressed her palms against her eyes as if she could physically stop them. Connor wasn't used to dealing with this kind of emotional breakdown, but sitting there doing nothing felt wrong, so he did the only thing he could think of. He slowly reached over, gently placing his hand on her back, rubbing in small circles while talking in a low, calming tone. "Ruby, you're okay. Just keep taking a deep breath. It's going to be okay. I'm going to get you home safe," Connor said softly. "You don't understand. I don't have a home," Ruby managed between sobs. Connor's eyes went wide as the problem presented itself fully. He pulled his hand back slightly, processing this new information. "You're homeless?" Connor asked carefully. "Kind of, not really," Ruby said, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "Well, that's clear as mud," Connor said, trying to inject a little levity. "I lost my place a couple months ago, and I've been couch surfing with friends. My friend Brandy works at a casino on the Strip, and she was going to pick me up in the morning after her shift. And I left my phone in my bag, which I left at work, and I don't know her number, and—" Ruby began rambling. The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other as she continued to cry. Her story painted a picture of someone barely holding on, even before the world fell apart, living paycheck to paycheck, depending on the kindness of friends, one bad day away from disaster. And now that bad day had turned into the worst day imaginable. Connor kept rubbing her back, steady and consistent, trying to get her to calm down. After a few moments of gentle coaxing, she focused on breathing deeply, which helped soothe her. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. The technique seemed to help, and her sobs gradually subsided to sniffles. Connor looked down at the bags of food they had collected, then over at Ruby, this young woman who'd already lost everything and was now completely alone. He knew that having another mouth to feed would cause the food supplies to dwindle faster, but leaving her to fend for herself would be a death sentence, and he knew it was the right thing to do. "Look, a friend of mine gave me the keys to his apartment. One of us might have to take the couch, but you can come along with me if you want," Connor offered. Ruby's sobbing intensified, but these were different tears, relief instead of despair. Without warning, she lunged at Connor, throwing her arms around him and gripping him tightly. Her small frame shook against him as she cried into his shoulder. "Thank you, Connor, thank you," Ruby said, her voice muffled against his jacket. The bodyguard patted her on the back awkwardly, not used to this kind of physical contact outside of restraining someone or protecting them from harm. He gently tried to get her to sit back, which she finally did after a few moments. Her face was red and blotchy from crying, but there was hope in her eyes now. He spoke up in a somewhat playful manner, trying to lighten the mood. "But you're gonna have to earn your keep," Connor said. Connor pointed to the GPS device mounted on the dashboard, its screen still glowing with their last route. "You get to be my navigator," Connor said. Ruby let out a bit of a laugh, a sound that brought relief to Connor. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, then grabbed the device, clicking through the menu to find the saved addresses. The screen illuminated her face in the darkness of the cab. "The one on Wintergreen?" Ruby asked, reading from the screen. "That's the one," Connor confirmed. She fiddled with the device for a few seconds, inputting the address and waiting for it to calculate the route. The electronic voice filled the cab, professionally cheerful despite the circumstances. "Proceed to the route. In 100 feet, turn right." "Looks like we're on our way," Connor said. He put the truck in gear and pulled out of the vacant lot, following the GPS directions. The apartment complex was a few miles away, as their escape from the supercenter had taken them in the wrong direction. They had gone south when they needed to go northeast, adding unnecessary distance to their journey. The two of them sat in silence for a few moments, the only sounds the rumble of the engine and the occasional GPS instruction. The streets remained mostly empty, though Connor spotted movement in windows and shadows darting between buildings. Whether they were survivors or infected, he couldn't tell and didn't want to find out. "So, is it really that bad out here?" Ruby asked, breaking the silence. "I've been out here all night, and the supercenter is the easiest time I've had so far," Connor admitted. Ruby's eyes went wide, her face paling even more, if that was possible. "Where have you been?" Ruby asked. "I started out at the Silver Moon Casino and been down to Lake Las Vegas," Connor said. "Oh no, the Strip is like the super center?" Ruby asked, her voice rising with concern. "It's worse in a lot of ways. Connor said honestly. Connor glanced over to Ruby, who looked like she was about to cry again. Her bottom lip trembled slightly and she was blinking rapidly. It clicked in his head that her friend Brandy worked on the strip. While he knew she was likely either dead or on her way to being so, the strip had been chaotic hours ago and would only have gotten worse. He put on a reassuring face. "Don't worry, I'm a bodyguard, so I know a lot of the security guys up on the strip. They're really on top of things, so I'm sure your friend is safe," Connor lied smoothly. Ruby knew that Connor was lying to protect her feelings. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened slightly, the way he gripped the steering wheel a little harder, but she appreciated the sentiment nonetheless. Sometimes a comforting lie was better than a harsh truth, especially when there was nothing that could be done about it. She gave a half-hearted nod as she spoke. "You're probably right. Besides, Brandy is a badass. She can handle herself," Ruby said, trying to convince herself. Connor nodded, wanting to keep her thinking positively. They needed hope, even if it was false hope. There was a long, awkward silence as they drove through the empty streets. Connor navigated around an abandoned car in the middle of the road, its doors hanging open, dark stains on the pavement beside it. Ruby stared out the window, watching the dead city pass by, her mind clearly elsewhere. Finally, Ruby broke the silence, her mental state clearly needing distraction from thoughts of her potentially dead friend. "So, you're a bodyguard?" Ruby asked. "Yep, have been for a few years actually," Connor replied. "Have you ever guarded someone famous?" Ruby asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "Not really. It's mostly wealthy guys wanting to hit the strip for a show or some gambling. That's what I was there for tonight," Connor explained. "They picked a heck of a night to hit the town, didn't they?" Ruby said. Connor let out a laugh despite everything, which caused Ruby to do the same. Both of them enjoyed the moment of levity, a brief respite from the horror of their situation. It felt good to laugh, even if it was tinged with darkness. Before they could continue talking, the GPS spoke up, its electronic voice cutting through their conversation. "Turn left, then your destination will be up on the right." Connor slowed as he approached the next intersection, checking both ways before making the turn onto the residential road. The street was lined with apartment buildings, 3- and 4-story structures with balconies and small patches of grass out front. It looked like a decent neighborhood, middle class, the kind of place young professionals and small families called home. He was forced to slam on the brakes, the truck's anti-lock system engaging as the tires grabbed at the asphalt. The sudden stop lurched them forward against their seatbelts, the bags of supplies sliding forward on the floor with a rustle of plastic. Half a block ahead, they could see the entrance to the apartment complex. The decorative sign reading Wintergreen Apartments was still lit, but the scene in front of it was pure chaos. A horde of ghouls filled the street, easily 50 of them, maybe more. They were pressed together in a writhing mass, all focused on something in their center. It was difficult to see what had drawn them to the area through the sea of bodies, but the duo strained their eyes to see. The zombies were climbing over each other, pushing and shoving in their desperation to reach whatever had their attention. "Is that a car?" Ruby asked, pointing toward the mass. She indicated a slightly bent streetlight on the corner, its pole twisted at an unnatural angle. Connor followed her gesture, straining to see exactly what she was pointing to. Once his eyes found it through gaps in the crowd, he couldn't unsee it. A sedan had lost control while going faster than it should have, probably trying to escape something. It had slammed into the light post with tremendous force. The entire front end was crumpled like an accordion, the hood bent upward, steam or smoke still wisping from the destroyed engine. The windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks, and the driver's side was caved in. The passengers inside were trapped by the twisted metal. There were so many creatures pressed against the car, pounding on the windows and roof, that they couldn't tell if the people inside were alive or not. The zombies were in a frenzy, their moans creating a constant drone that they could hear even inside the truck with the windows up. "I don't think we're going to be able to get through that," Connor said. "So, what do we do?" Ruby asked. Connor continued staring out the front windshield at the mob, his mind racing through any idea that would seem viable. Ram through them? No, too many. They'd get bogged down. Go around? The apartment complex only had one entrance that he could see. Wait them out? Who knew how long they'd stay there? Finally, he half-heartedly perked up, though his expression suggested he wasn't confident in his idea. I think I have an idea, but it's not a very good one, Connor admitted. Well, I have nothing, so you're one up on me. What do you think? Ruby asked. If I lay on the horn, those things will come our way, Connor said. Ruby stared at him in disbelief, shaking her head vigorously. Her red ponytail whipped back and forth with the motion. I'm not liking this plan so far, Ruby said. I told you it wasn't very good, Connor said with a shrug. So, we tell them that we're here. Then what? Ruby pressed. We lure them away, circle back around the block, and hopefully then we're able to get into the parking lot, Connor explained. Then we just have to hope that the building isn't blocked, Ruby pointed out. Connor gave a shrug, not sure how to respond to that very valid concern. If the parking lot or building entrance was swarming with zombies, they'd be trapped. Ruby began shaking her head, speaking quickly as if she'd offended him. No, I wasn't criticizing it. I was just... Ruby began, vocalizing a fatal flaw. I get it, and you're right. It's a risk, but I don't know what else to do, Connor said. Ruby thought about it for a few moments, chewing on her bottom lip as she weighed their options. Stay in the truck and hope the zombies wandered off? Try to find another place to hole up? Or take the risk and try Connor's admittedly flawed plan? Finally, she nodded. I say we go for it, Ruby said with more confidence than she felt. Connor nodded before turning around in his seat to stare at the horde through the windshield. He gripped the steering wheel with his left hand, his right hovering over the horn. The truck was still in drive, his foot on the brake, ready to move the instant they had the zombies' attention. With a final nod to himself, he planted his hand firmly into the middle of the horn. The truck's horn blared through the night, a long, sustained note that echoed off the apartment buildings. The effect was immediate. Every zombie's head snapped toward them in unison, like marionettes controlled by the same string. The first ones were already breaking away from the crashed car, their interest in the trapped occupants forgotten in favor of this new, louder prey. They began running toward the truck with that horrifying speed, arms outstretched, mouths open in excited moans. Make sure your seatbelt is secure, because this is going to be interesting. Chapter 5. Connor continued laying on the horn, the annoying sound filling the night air and echoing off the apartment buildings. The blare was loud enough to wake anyone still alive in the surrounding blocks, but that was a problem for later. Right now, he needed every zombie's attention on them and away from that apartment entrance. In a matter of seconds, the creatures at the back of the pack surrounding the wrecked car turned and took notice. Their heads snapped toward the sound in that unnatural, synchronized way that made Connor's skin crawl. Dead eyes locked onto the truck, and excited moans rose from their throats. Once they were looking in Connor's direction, he flashed the headlights repeatedly, the beams cutting through the darkness in rapid succession. The bright lights gave them one more reason to chase after the truck, instead of staying with their current prey. In a flash, a dozen zombies broke away from the car, sprinting in the direction of the truck. Connor kept one hand on the horn while putting the truck into reverse with the other, the transmission clunking as it engaged. He wanted to get as many zombies away from the entrance of the apartment complex as possible. The engine whined as he backed up slowly, keeping the horn blaring. However, as he watched through the windshield, barely half of the pack broke away to come in their direction. The rest remained fixated on the crashed car, pounding on the windows with increasing fervor. Damn it, Connor cursed. Connor stared at the zombies coming toward them, his mind quickly assessing the situation. They were spread out in a loose line rather than bunched together, with gaps between them wide enough to potentially drive through. The closest ones were maybe 30 yards away and closing fast. In a move he didn't think about, operating on pure instinct, he threw the truck into drive and hit the gas. The transmission protested the sudden shift, but the truck lurched forward obediently. Ruby began screaming as the vehicle picked up speed toward the encroaching mob. Her hands braced against the dashboard, her eyes wide with terror. The truck bounced violently as they smacked into the front edge of the creatures. The first impact sent a zombie flying through the air, its body cartwheeling over the hood and disappearing behind them. Another glanced off the driver's side, leaving a bloody smear on the metal. The impacts were solid, jarring, making the whole vehicle shake. "What are you doing?" Ruby screamed. "We have to get them away from the entrance," Connor shouted back. Connor plowed through a couple more zombies, the sickening thuds of impact mixing with the sound of Ruby's panicked breathing. One creature's arm got caught under the wheel, the bones crunching audibly. Another bounced off the grill, taking out a headlight. Then Connor slammed on the brakes, the tires skidded on the asphalt, leaving dark marks on the road. As soon as they stopped, he slammed his hand down on the horn again. This time, they were close enough that the sound reached the ears of every zombie around the car. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The entire horde turned toward them as one, abandoning the crash vehicle entirely. They broke toward the truck in a wave of death, their moans creating a terrible chorus. "Now we're talking," Connor said with grim satisfaction. Connor threw the truck into reverse, the tires spinning briefly before catching. They backed over a couple of zombies that were still on the ground from the initial impact, the truck lifting and dropping as it rolled over the bodies. The violent motion tossed the duo around inside the cab, Ruby's shoulder hitting the door despite her seatbelt. As soon as he broke through the last few zombies standing behind them, Connor slammed on the brakes and cut the wheel hard to the right. The truck's rear end swung around in a tight arc, tires squealing in protest. They spun in a perfect 180, the centrifugal force pressing them against their seats. Ruby smacked against the passenger side window as they came to an abrupt stop in the middle of the road, the impact leaving her dazed. A second later, Connor threw it into drive and hit the gas, the engine roaring as they picked up speed down the road. The speedometer climbed rapidly, 20, 30, 40 miles per hour. "Are you all right?" Connor asked, glancing over at Ruby. "Yeah, I'm fine, but what the hell was that?" Ruby said, rubbing her shoulder. "Look behind us," Connor instructed. Ruby did as asked, turning around in her seat to look through the rear window. The majority of the zombies that had been in front of the apartment complex were now following them, a mass of bodies running down the street in pursuit. There had to be at least 40 of them, maybe more, all focused entirely on the truck. "Okay, you were right," Ruby admitted. "Don't give me credit yet. We still have to get around the block," Connor said. Connor sped down the street, the engine growling as he pushed it harder. He went a couple of blocks, putting distance between them and the pursuing horde, before making a sharp left turn to begin circling around. The tires protested but held their grip. As soon as he completed the turn, however, he was forced to slam on the brakes. Another small mob of zombies spilled out into the street from between two buildings, maybe a dozen of them. They must have been drawn by the noise of the chase, converging from side streets and alleys. Connor's eyes quickly scanned the scene. He saw a narrow lane to the right that might allow them to pass, a gap between the zombies and a parked car. After muttering some curse-filled inspirations to himself, building up his courage, he hit the gas. They picked up speed quickly, the truck's powerful engine responding instantly. But the revving engine noise not only drew the attention of the zombies already in the street, but pulled more out from an alley just up the block. They emerged like roaches from a wall, pouring out in numbers Connor hadn't expected. Within moments, there was a wall of ghouls running toward them, completely blocking the road. Rather than risk damage to the truck by driving straight through them, damage that could leave them stranded, Connor cut the wheel hard to the right, just before the intersection. The truck jumped the curb with a violent jolt, the suspension groaning in protest. They went airborne for a split second before landing hard on the side road, the impact rattling Connor's teeth. Connor kept the truck speed high, not wanting to give the zombies a chance to converge on them again. He went several blocks down the side street before finally stopping, the brakes squealing slightly as they came to rest. They both turned around to assess the situation behind them. A few of the pursuing creatures were still coming after them, their inhuman endurance allowing them to maintain their sprint even after several blocks. However, most of them had lost interest, undoubtedly being distracted by other sounds, movements, or potential prey elsewhere in the neighborhood. "What do we do?" Ruby asked, her voice small. Connor continued staring back at the scattered zombies, his mind trying to calculate just how many of those creatures were around the apartment complex and surrounding streets. If every street was like this, if every block had its own mob, they might never make it to safety. After a long stretch of silence that felt like hours but was only seconds, Ruby spoke up again. "Connor, what do we do?" Ruby repeated, more urgently. "We might have to take the long way around back to the complex," Connor said. But what if those people go back to the crash at the front? Ruby asked. Then we'll figure it out, Ruby, Connor said. Connor's voice lacked any sort of confidence, and Ruby could tell. The uncertainty in his tone was impossible to miss. As a result, she quieted down, not wanting to put any more pressure on him. He was doing his best in an impossible situation, and she knew it. The bodyguard hit the gas, driving up to the next block before hanging a left. They moved more cautiously now, Connor keeping the speed moderate to minimize engine noise. They drove 2 blocks in tense silence before again slowing down, spotting another wrecked car ahead. This one was resting on its side, a small SUV that had somehow flipped. 4 zombies surrounded it, pawing at the undercarriage and occasionally moaning. Connor continued driving, letting up on the gas as they approached to minimize the noise. The engine dropped to barely a purr. As they got within a block, movement caught their attention. A young woman suddenly emerged from the driver's side window that was sticking straight up in the air, using the doorframe to pull herself up. She waved frantically at the truck, her arms moving in desperate arcs, silently pleading with them for help. Even from a distance, they could see blood on her face and the terror in her eyes. "We should pick them up," Ruby said. Connor looked over to Ruby, then motioned down to the meager selection of groceries sitting between them. The bags seemed even smaller now, inadequate for 2 people, let alone more. "This is all the food we have, and it's not a lot. If we add another person," Connor began. Connor trailed off when he saw Ruby glaring at him. Her green eyes were hard, disappointed, and her silence said all that needed to be said. She'd been in that woman's position just an hour ago, terrified and alone, and Connor had saved her. How could they not do the same for someone else? The bodyguard reluctantly nodded, knowing it wouldn't be right to just leave the woman there to die, even if it meant stretching their already limited resources. "Okay, we'll get her," Connor conceded. Ruby let out a smile, the first genuine one he'd seen from her. Connor drove up slowly alongside the wreck, careful to maintain steady speed. He kept the truck moving fast enough to push the creatures around the car out of the way with the bumper and brush guard, but not fast enough to risk hitting the car itself and sending it toppling over. The zombies turned toward the truck, but Connor used the vehicle's mass to nudge them aside. They stumbled away, more interested in this new target, but unable to get purchase on the moving vehicle. Ruby rolled down the window as they pulled up alongside the overturned SUV. "Hey, I'm Ruby. Do you need a lift?" Ruby called out. The young woman was in her late 20s, with blonde hair that was stained red at the tips from where it had come into contact with a cut on her forehead. Blood had run down the side of her face, already starting to dry in dark streaks. Her clothes were disheveled, and she had that shocked look of someone who'd been through trauma. "I'm Julia, and yes, we desperately need a lift," the woman replied. "We need a lift?" Connor asked, catching the plural. "Yeah, my boyfriend Owen is in here too," Julia explained. At the mention of his name, a bloodied hand suddenly shot up through the window from inside the vehicle, giving a playful wave before retreating back into the car. Despite the situation, the gesture had an almost comedic timing to it. Connor felt his heart sink at the revelation of yet another person to protect and feed. But he hid it well, as he motioned for them to come their way. "Just jump in the back and we'll get you out of here," Connor said. "Thank you so much. We owe you our lives," Julia said. Connor nodded as he waved his hand urgently, trying to get her to speed up. Julia caught on to his urgency and quickly climbed fully on top of the car, balancing on the side panel. She reached down to pull Owen up. Owen emerged slowly, clearly hurting from the crash. He was about the same age as Julia, late 20s, sporting a similar head injury from the wreck. His dark hair was matted with blood, and he moved stiffly, probably nursing bruised ribs or worse. It took a moment for them to find their footing on the slippery metal of the overturned vehicle, doing their best to ignore the creatures reaching up for them with grasping fingers. They jumped over into the back of the truck with a heavy thud, Owen grunting in pain as he landed. Once they were both safely in the bed, they took a knee at the back window, gripping the truck's side rails for support. "So where can we take you?" Ruby asked through the open window. Connor shot Ruby a sharp glance, his eyes wide in disbelief. Ruby saw his expression and slumped down in her seat a bit, realizing her mistake. She shouldn't have offered them up as a taxi service when they barely had a safe place to go themselves. "We have a house not too far from here, just a few miles. I know it's a lot to ask, but..." Julia began. Julia trailed off as an idea sparked in Connor's mind. A house might be better than an apartment, especially if it was in a secure area. More space, possibly more supplies, and fewer neighbors to potentially turn into threats. "What kind of neighborhood is the house in?" Connor asked. Julia was confused by the question, but answered anyway. "It's in a soft-gated community," Julia said. "Soft-gated?" Ruby asked, unfamiliar with the term. "Yeah, there's a chain-link fence surrounding it, and there's a gate to get in, but it's never closed," Julia explained. Connor continued thinking for a moment, weighing their options. The apartment might already be overrun by the time they circled back. A fenced community, even with just a chain-link fence, offered some protection. And a gate, even if normally left open, could be closed and secured. He turned to speak through the back window. "I'll get you home, but only if you let us stay," Connor proposed. Julia wasn't sure what to make of the request. She flinched as one of the zombies smacked their hands against the side of the truck, the sound making her jump. The reminder of the danger they were all in seemed to drive home the fact that she didn't really have much of an option. They needed the ride, and Connor needed the shelter. "Why would you want to stay with us?" "Don't you have a home?" Julia asked. "Not one that I have any chance at getting to. The sun is going to be up before too long, and we really need to be someplace safe before that happens," Connor explained. Julia could hear the fear in Connor's voice, even though he tried to hide it well. "Okay, you can stay with us until this calms down," Julia agreed. Connor nodded appreciatively, already shifting the truck into gear. "Thank you. Now secure yourself as best you can back there, because we're going to be moving fast." Chapter 6. Connor drove the foursome down the darkened streets, relieved to see that there wasn't much in the way of zombies. The occasional shadow moved between houses, and once he spotted a lone figure stumbling across a lawn, but nothing like the hordes they'd encountered earlier. Despite the limited movement, he remained vigilant, hands tight on the wheel, constantly checking mirrors. He knew that all it would take was one well-placed zombie to cause them major problems. Connor followed the directions coming out of the GPS, the electronic voice calmly guiding them through residential streets toward Julia and Owen's house. He glanced at the device's screen, seeing that it was less than half a mile away. The distance seemed both impossibly close and dangerously far given what they'd been through. The bodyguard adjusted his position to talk through the back window, raising his voice to be heard over the wind and engine noise. "How is this thing taking me into the neighborhood?" Connor asked. Julia leaned forward, looking at the GPS device through the window, studying the map display for a moment. The screen's glow illuminated her face in the darkness as she traced the route with her finger. "It looks like we're coming up on the east side of it." "The entrance is on the north side," Julia explained. "Copy that. Keep an eye out for anything that might give us trouble," Connor said. Julia nodded as she and Owen continued scanning their surroundings as they drove. Owen winced occasionally from his injuries, but kept watch on his side, knowing their lives might depend on spotting danger early. The streets remained mostly quiet, just the rumble of the truck's engine and the whisper of wind through the open windows. Within minutes, they came to a stop just across from the neighborhood. Connor looked across the street, studying what would hopefully be their sanctuary. A 6-foot-tall chain-link fence ran along the perimeter, separating the development from the outside world. It wasn't much. Any determined person could climb it in seconds, and he'd seen zombies crash through weaker barriers. But it was something. "Well, it isn't going to keep much of a horde out, but it's better than nothing," Connor said. Connor made the turn, driving slowly along the outer edge of the neighborhood. He kept the speed low to minimize engine noise while studying the fence line for weak points, breaks, or places where zombies might have already gotten through. The fence appeared intact, though rust showed in places and some sections leaned slightly from age and weather. They reached the north side after a minute of careful driving. Connor pulled partially out into the street, positioning the truck to give himself a clear view of the front gate, which was 50 yards down on the left side of the road. The entrance was marked by stone pillars on either side, though the gate itself was a simple chain-link affair on wheels, currently standing open. He could see some movement near the front, just a few creatures wandering aimlessly near the entrance. They seemed directionless, shuffling rather than hunting, which meant they hadn't detected prey recently. However, that wasn't what concerned him. Across the street from the entrance was an open neighborhood with no fence, no barriers, and he could see significant movement in the streetlights. Dozens of shapes moving between houses, some walking, some running. "Well, that's not ideal," Connor muttered. "We'll have a head start on them." "It shouldn't be difficult to beat them to the house and get unloaded before they get there," Ruby suggested. "I don't like it. If we're going to ride this out, we need to be able to close up that front gate. And that's a lot harder to do if we're being chased around by those things," Connor said. As Connor stared down at the zombies across the way, his mind running through the options, Ruby focused her attention inside the fenced-in neighborhood. She couldn't see much detail in the darkness, just houses and driveways. However, her eye was drawn to something different. An industrial-sized generator sitting amongst a pile of wood that was visible through a gap between two houses. Construction materials were stacked nearby. Plywood sheets, 2x4s, bags of concrete. "Connor, what's that?" Ruby asked. Ruby pointed it out, speaking loud enough for the duo in the back to hear. Before Connor could respond, Owen popped his head in through the window, his movement quick despite his injuries. "One of the neighbors is doing some construction, adding on a new room, I think," Owen explained. "How long have they been working on it?" Connor asked. "Not too long, a couple days maybe," Owen said. Connor thought about it for a moment, his tactical mind seeing possibilities. Fresh construction meant tools, materials, and most importantly, sturdy building supplies that hadn't been weathered or weakened. He nodded as a plan formed. "Then that's how we're doing it. That's how we're going to seal this place up," Connor decided. "With some plywood?" Julia asked skeptically. "Not just plywood. We can use some cars to block the entrance, then use the construction material to reinforce it. It's not going to be perfect, but it will certainly help," Connor explained. "Now we just have to figure out how to get into the gate without being seen," Ruby pointed out. Connor again went into contemplation mode, his eyes unfocused as he ran through ideas in his head. After a few seconds, he turned back to the others with renewed purpose. "Owen, Julia, do either of you have a car at the house?" Connor asked. "Yeah, we have mine." "It's an average-sized sedan," Julia replied. "Okay, I can work with that. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get you to the house, drop the three of you off, then pull those things back out of the neighborhood," Connor explained. "How is that going to work?" Ruby asked. "Hopefully pretty well, because realistically, we aren't going to be able to sneak past those things without being spotted," Connor admitted. "So, what do you want us to do?" Owen asked. "Owen, when I drop you off, I want you to get that sedan and drive it to the front gate. Park it across it and block as much of the entrance as you can," Connor instructed. "You want me to middle it?" Owen asked. "No, put your front bumper against one side of the gate. When I come back, I'll take care of the other side," Connor clarified. Owen nodded understanding, but Julia shook her head vigorously, her blonde hair whipping back and forth. "I don't like it," Julia protested. "Well, I can let Owen drive the truck and be the decoy if that sounds better," Connor offered. Connor's tone was dismissive, making it clear that wasn't really an option. Owen put his hand on Julia's shoulder in a comforting manner, squeezing gently. "Don't worry, honey. I'll be okay," Owen assured her. "If those people are around your car, you don't get out. You understand me?" Julia said firmly. Owen nodded as Connor motioned for them to sit back down in the truck bed. "Don't worry. I'll take care of anything that's still on that side of the line when I get back. Now we have to do this, so get ready," Connor said. Julia and Owen nodded as they planted their backs against the cab of the truck, bracing for what was coming. Ruby, meanwhile, began threading her arms through every bag of food in the front of the truck, gathering the plastic handles to carry as many as possible. She gave Connor a concerned look, worry evident in her green eyes. Her expression brought a smirk to his face as he spoke. "Don't worry, this isn't even a top 5 dangerous move for me tonight," Connor said. Connor's bravado caused Ruby to chuckle despite the situation, before quickly snapping back into serious mode. The bodyguard took a deep breath, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he mentally prepared himself. Then he hit the gas. They picked up speed quickly, 0 to 40 in seconds. The engine roared, the sound echoing off the buildings and carrying through the night air. The noise immediately drew the attention of the 3 zombies right by the front entrance. Their heads snapped toward the truck in unison, and they began their inhuman sprint toward the vehicle. The creatures across the street reacted as well, dozens of dead eyes turning toward the sound. They began moving en masse. a wave of death converging on the entrance. The zombies closest to them closed the gap quickly, but the front end of the truck made short work of them. The first creature bounced off the brush guard with a sickening crunch, spinning away into the darkness. The second went under the wheels, the truck lifting slightly as it rolled over the body. Connor cut the wheel hard, tires squealing in protest, as he made the turn into the neighborhood. The truck leaned dangerously to the left, and he heard Julia cry out from the bed as she and Owen slid against the side rail. The tires caught, and they shot forward into the development. It wasn't a large community, just a 3-block by 3-block grid with a few dozen homes. Cookie-cutter houses with small yards and 2-car garages, the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors and kids played in the streets. But it was just large enough for him to put some distance between them and the pursuing creatures. He kept the pedal to the metal, racing through the center street toward the rear of the neighborhood where Julia's house was. The speedometer hit 50, dangerous for a residential street, but necessary given what was chasing them. As he crossed the first side street, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye, shapes emerging from between houses, drawn by the engine noise. "Damn it, those things are already inside," Connor cursed. Connor kept pushing on, knowing that they were too deep into the plan to change things now. Stopping or turning back would only get them surrounded. Their only option was forward. As he crossed the next intersection, he spotted more movement in both directions. Zombies were stumbling out of yards, converging on the truck's path. The engine noise was pulling them in like a magnet, every creature in the neighborhood now aware of their presence. He got to the end of the street, slamming on the brakes right in front of Julia's house. As soon as they were stationary, the other 3 people quickly got to the ground. Owen jumped down first, grunting in pain as he landed, then turned to help Julia down. Ruby was already opening her door, bags rustling as she gathered them. Julia came to Ruby's aid without being asked, grabbing a few of the bags to help lighten her load. Connor yelled out to Owen as the man ran toward the house. "Owen, you get that entrance blocked, and you stay put until I get back," Connor shouted. Rather than respond verbally, Owen gave him a thumbs up as he ran, fishing keys from his pocket. Connor looked back up the street, spotting a couple dozen zombies gaining on them. They were maybe 50 yards away and closing fast. He laid on the horn, the blaring sound filling the night, before hitting the gas. "Come and get me." Chapter 7. Connor sped through the neighborhood, laying on the horn while checking the mirror to make sure that the zombies were still following him. The horn's blare echoed between the houses, and in his rear view, he could see the mob of creatures running after him, their arms outstretched, never tiring. He muttered curses as he watched a couple of zombies break off from the main group, following the others up to Julia's house. His heart raced until he saw the 3 people get safely inside, the door slamming shut behind them. Connor stopped at the next street, turning the wheel slightly to angle the truck and giving the zombies time to catch up to him. He needed them focused on him, not searching the neighborhood for other prey. The first creatures reached the truck within seconds, their dead hands banging on the back bumper with enough force to rock the vehicle. The metallic thumps reverberated through the cab. Once he was sure he had their attention, he hit the gas, but kept the speed slow enough for them to keep pace. Maybe 15 miles per hour, just fast enough to stay ahead, but not lose them. It took him a full minute of driving before getting back up to the front entrance, weaving through the streets while maintaining his parade of death. He made the turn toward the gate, only to see more zombies running at him from the neighborhood across the way. Fresh ones, drawn by all the noise. They converged on the truck from multiple angles. He gripped the wheel tightly, knuckles white, as he accelerated, knowing it was going to be a bumpy ride. The front end of the truck plowed through the front edge of the zombie mob with devastating force. Bodies flew in different directions, some rolling over the hood, others spinning away into the darkness. The impacts shook the entire vehicle, but one ghoul managed to get caught up in the wheel well, its body wedging between the tire and the truck's frame. The tire sputtered and ground against the obstruction, trying to free itself, creating an awful grinding noise mixed with the sound of breaking bones. Connor swerved from side to side, fighting to keep control of the truck as the zombie's body jostled around inside the wheel well. The steering wheel pulled hard to the left, and he had to use all his strength to keep the vehicle going straight. The trapped corpse was affecting the truck's handling, making every turn unpredictable. Much to his relief, The body finally dislodged when he jumped a curb, the violent jolt shaking it loose. However, in the process, he heard a loud pop. The tire had blown, rubber shredding from the impact and stress. The bodyguard kept the pedal down, maintaining as much speed as he could as he entered the neighborhood across from their sanctuary. The rim scraped against the asphalt with a horrible metallic shriek, sparks flying in the darkness. What was left of the tire continued shredding, pieces of rubber flying off behind him like black confetti. Come on, just a few more blocks, that's all I need," Connor said to himself. Connor did his best to wheel the truck forward, the vehicle lurching and pulling to the left from the damaged wheel. He made the turn at the next street, relief washing over him when he saw it was empty. No zombies, no obstacles, just clear road. He continued driving, the damaged truck now slow enough that the zombies were keeping pace with him easily. Some were even gaining ground. As Connor made the turn on the main road back toward the front gate of their safe haven, he spotted Owen pulling the sedan into place. The car's headlights illuminated the gate area as Owen maneuvered it into position. However, Connor's relief was short-lived. Half a dozen zombies were swarming the vehicle on the wrong side of the barricade, pounding on the windows and hood, trying to get to Owen inside. Connor gunned it, the engine roaring as he tried to pick up speed despite the damaged wheel. The truck lurched forward, the rim grinding harder against the pavement, leaving a groove in the asphalt. He needed to put a little distance between himself and the pursuing mob to give himself room to maneuver. He got across the street, turning wide to build momentum before cutting back sharply so that he could park alongside Owen's sedan, positioning his front bumper against the opposite side of the gate. The truck slid into position and Connor threw it into park. But before he could even reach for the door handle, zombies smacked against the driver's side door. The mob had caught up with him faster than anticipated, and now they were pressed against his window, their dead faces inches from his own. The glass was already starting to crack under the assault. "Looks like I'm going out the back," Connor said. Connor grabbed his hunting shotgun from beside him, checking that it was loaded before sliding it through the back window into the truck bed. Then came the hard part, getting himself through. He took a deep breath to make himself as small as possible, then began squeezing through the opening. It was a tight fit, his broad shoulders catching on the frame. His jacket tore as he forced himself through, finally tumbling into the truck bed with a grunt. He looked over to Owen, who was pressed against the passenger side door of his sedan, eyes wide with panic as he saw zombies swarming both vehicles. "Just sit tight, I got this," Connor called out. Owen nodded, giving Connor a shaky thumbs up, before watching the bodyguard leap from the back of the truck to the roof of his sedan. Connor's boots landed with a metallic thud, denting the roof slightly. He steadied himself, then readied his shotgun, aiming it at the back tire of the truck. The tire exploded, and the side of the truck sank down closer to the ground. He knew it wasn't a perfect solution, but the lowered stance would make it more difficult for the zombies to get enough leverage to move the truck. He then turned his attention to the zombies trapped inside the neighborhood, the ones that had already been inside when they'd arrived. Connor drew his handgun, slinging the shotgun across his back. He took careful aim, knowing he had limited ammunition and couldn't afford to waste shots. The first zombie was maybe 10 feet away, stumbling toward him. He squeezed the trigger, and the creature's head snapped back, a hole appearing in its forehead. It dropped instantly. One by one, the creatures fell. Each shot was precise, methodical. Connor had trained for years at the range, but he'd never imagined using those skills like this. In a matter of seconds, 6 zombies lay motionless on the ground, truly dead this time. Connor jumped down from the car roof, his boots hitting the pavement hard. He gave the driver's side door a light knock, the sound barely audible over the moaning from the zombies on the other side of the barricade. Owen emerged slowly, looking around in disbelief at the bodies on the ground. "Are they all dead?" Owen asked. "The ones inside are." "Come on, we have to reinforce this," Connor said. The 2 men turned and started jogging down the street, heading toward the construction site they'd spotted earlier. They needed materials to shore up the vehicle barricade, plywood, concrete blocks, anything that would make it harder for the zombies to push through. Their footsteps echoed off the houses as they ran. They managed to get half a block before a handful of zombies came running out from a yard just up ahead. They must have been inside one of the houses, drawn out by all the commotion. 5 of them, moving in that terrifying sprint. Connor tried to pull Owen into the shadows between two houses, but it was too late. The lead zombie's head snapped toward them, and it let out an excited moan that alerted the others. They were spotted. "Run!" Connor shouted. The two men cut through a yard, their feet pounding across someone's carefully maintained lawn. The ghouls gave chase, gaining ground with every step. The creatures were within 20 yards as the duo cut across to the next street, Connor's damaged shoulder protesting as he pumped his arms. Connor looked to the right, scanning desperately for options. He spotted a yard with a waist-high chain-link fence. He grabbed onto Owen's arm, his fingers digging in hard as he dragged him in the right direction. They sprinted toward it with everything they had. The ghouls continued to gain on them, now maybe 15 feet back, but they reached the fence a few steps ahead. Both men leapt up, grabbing the top of the fence and hauling themselves over. They landed hard on the other side, stumbling from the impact. Owen fell to the ground, his injuries from the car crash making the landing worse. The first zombie slammed into the fence, the metal shaking but holding. The sound startled Owen, making him cry out. Connor raised his handgun without hesitation, firing off a single round at point-blank range. The zombie's head was less than 2 feet away when the bullet went through its skull, dropping it instantly. Suddenly, lights clicked on inside the house, flooding the backyard with illumination from the patio. Connor heard panicked voices from inside, footsteps running across floors. This did little to deter him. He continued firing, methodically putting down each of the creatures that had followed them. 4 more shots, 4 more bodies piling up against the fence. Both men relaxed slightly, their breathing heavy from the sprint, but they quickly tensed up again as the back patio door of the house opened with a creak. A moment later, a middle-aged man emerged carrying a handgun, aiming it directly at them. He was wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt, clearly just awakened, but his grip on the weapon was steady. "Why in the hell are you shooting guns in my yard?" the homeowner demanded. Connor had his gun aimed down, caught off guard by the man's sudden appearance. However, he tracked the homeowner's eyes carefully. As soon as the man took his gaze from the duo to focus on the dead creatures piled against his fence, Connor reacted swiftly. His training kicked in, and he raised his handgun in one smooth motion, creating a standoff. Owen freaked out at the escalation, immediately putting his hands up and slowly stepping forward. He positioned himself between the 2 armed men, trying to defuse the situation before someone got shot. "Everybody calm down, everybody calm down. We're fine," Owen said desperately. "There are 4 dead people outside my house, and you murdered them," the homeowner accused. "They're not people, not anymore," Connor said firmly. "Bullshit," the homeowner spat. "He's telling the truth." "Look, you recognize me, right?" Owen said, trying a different approach. The homeowner gave Owen a once-over, squinting in the patio light. After a moment, he nodded slightly but didn't lower his gun. "Yeah, I guess so. You and your woman own the house at the end of the block," the homeowner said. "That's right. My name is Owen, and my girlfriend is Julia," Owen confirmed. "Yeah, well, I don't know you well enough to excuse murder," the homeowner said. Before the situation could escalate further, another zombie came running to the fence, slamming into it with a bang that made everyone jump. Connor and Owen glanced back, seeing that the creature was missing a huge portion of its neck. The wound was grotesque, showing exposed vertebrae and dangling tissue. No living person could survive such an injury, yet it moved with purpose and violence. The 2 men slowly took steps to the side, moving away from the fence to allow the homeowner to get a better look at the monster trying to get into his yard. "This is what we're dealing with out there. Every person I put down was like this," Connor explained. The homeowner stared in disbelief, his mind trying to process what he was seeing. Initially, some part of him thought it must be some sort of sick joke, elaborate special effects, or makeup. But the smell hit him, decay and blood, and he realized it was real. He lowered his handgun slightly, inching closer for a better look. He stopped only when Owen gently grabbed onto his arm. "Don't get too close," Owen warned. The homeowner nodded, still staring in disbelief at the creature clawing at his fence. "That can't be real," the homeowner said, his voice barely above a whisper. Connor didn't hesitate. He raised his handgun and sent a single round through the zombie's chest, right where the heart should be. The homeowner yelled out in shock, but quickly settled down when he realized the shot didn't disturb the zombie in the slightest. It kept clawing at the fence, kept moaning, completely unaffected by what should have been a fatal wound. "What is happening?" the homeowner asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know what this is. All I know is that a headshot puts them down for good," Connor said. Connor adjusted his aim, raising the barrel to head level, and put the creature out of its misery. The zombie dropped instantly, adding to the pile of corpses against the fence. The homeowner continued standing there in shock, his weapon now hanging loose at his side, trying to comprehend this new reality. What do we do?" the homeowner asked. "I have an idea, but I'm going to need your car." Chapter 8. Connor slipped behind the wheel of a sedan parked inside the homeowner's garage. The car was a few years old but well-maintained, the kind of practical vehicle a suburban father would drive. He rolled down the window, the glass sliding smoothly, and turned to talk to Owen and the shaken homeowner standing in the garage. "I'm going to do a sweep around the neighborhood to make sure we're clear," Connor said. "What do you need us to do?" Owen asked. "Start calling every neighbor you can. Tell them what's going on, but make sure they remain inside until I tell them otherwise," Connor instructed. The two men nodded before retreating into the house through the garage's interior door. Connor could hear them already discussing who to call first, their voices fading as they moved deeper into the home. He started up the car, the engine turning over with a healthy purr. He let it idle for a moment, checking the fuel gauge, 3/4 full, more than enough, before reaching up and hitting the garage door opener clipped to the visor. The metal door slowly crept up with a mechanical groan, revealing the outside world inch by inch. Connor tensed, his hand moving to his handgun, ready for zombies to come charging at the sound. Much to his relief, the driveway was clear, no movement in the street, no moaning in the distance. "Let's hope that's a sign of things to come," Connor muttered to himself. The bodyguard pulled out of the driveway, the tires rolling over the smooth asphalt. He turned toward the back of the neighborhood, away from the gate, keeping his hand hovering over the horn as he went. He crept along at maybe 10 miles per hour, slow enough to spot any movement but fast enough to accelerate if needed. His eyes swept left and right, checking yards, driveways, the shadows between houses. It took him a good 5 minutes to drive around the entire neighborhood, making sure to drive past every house. He went up and down each street methodically, like he was running a search grid. If they were going to be successful in securing the neighborhood, it had to be completely empty of zombies. Even one creature left inside could spread and turn their sanctuary into a death trap. Finally, he made his way back up to the front entrance, expecting to see signs of the creatures breaching their meager defenses. The two vehicles blocking the gate looked vulnerable, temporary. Surely the zombies would have found a way around, over, or through. Much to his surprise, none had. The barricade held. He sat there in the idling car, staring at it for several moments. A tiny bit of relief settled over him. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could actually create a safe zone in this nightmare. Connor perked up when he heard the sound of a pickup truck coming his way from deeper in the neighborhood. The engine rumbled distinctively, different from a car. The last homeowner he'd had a run-in with had tried to shoot him, so this immediately put him on edge. His hand went to his weapon. The bodyguard wasn't going to be caught flat-footed. He threw open the door and stepped out, readying his handgun but keeping it low, not quite aimed but ready to snap up. As soon as he emerged from the car, a familiar voice rang out from the approaching truck. "It's okay, Connor. It's just us," Owen called out. The bodyguard relaxed his stance but took on an antagonistic tone, frustrated that his instructions were being ignored. "I thought I told you to stay inside until I gave the all clear," Connor said sharply. "There's a problem at one of the houses," Owen said urgently. Connor tensed up, the relief he'd felt evaporating. He pointed to Owen and motioned for him to jump down from the truck. "You stay by this car and keep an eye on the barricade." "I won't be long," Connor ordered. Owen nodded and did as instructed, climbing down from the passenger side. Connor made his way over to the truck, pulling open the passenger door and seeing another man sitting behind the wheel. The driver was in his 40s, wearing a rumpled polo shirt and khakis. His face was ashen white, drained of all color, as if terror had fully overtaken him. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. "Are you okay, man?" Connor asked carefully. It's my daughter," the man managed, his voice breaking. Connor's heart dropped. He immediately understood what those words meant in this new world. He shut the door behind him without another word. The man hit the gas, driving back through the neighborhood faster than was safe. He remained silent the entire time, jaw clenched, eyes fixed straight ahead. As they pulled into the driveway of a 2-story colonial, the bodyguard recognized the first homeowner he had encountered, the one from the fence incident. The man was standing by the front door, his arm around a woman who was sobbing uncontrollably. She was presumably the driver's wife, still in her nightgown, her face streaked with tears. "What's going on?" Connor asked as he got out. "My daughter, something is wrong with her. She was so sick before bedtime that she couldn't move. And now, she's... The mother tried to explain through her sobs. Connor looked over to the homeowner, who gave a defeated, subtle shake of his head. The meaning was clear. The daughter had turned. The bodyguard gave them a solemn nod before stepping past them into the house. He could hear banging coming from the back of the house down a hallway. The sound was rhythmic, insistent. Bang, bang, bang. Something hitting wood over and over. It didn't take much more than that for Connor to realize that their daughter had turned into one of those things. He stood at the entrance to the hallway, looking down the darkened corridor. Family photos lined the walls, vacations, birthdays, school pictures. A young girl growing up, smiling in every image. He knew what needed to be done, but couldn't convince his feet to move. This wasn't some random zombie on the street. This had been someone's child. After several long moments, the 3 others came inside behind him, stopping in the living room. The parents clung to each other, barely able to stand. "I told them what's going on." "And he saw the others you left at my doorstep," the homeowner said quietly. The husband and wife tried to speak, but broke down into tears again. Connor looked over to the father, making eye contact, silently asking if it was okay for him to do what needed to be done. The man couldn't speak, but after a few agonizing moments, he nodded in agreement. Just barely, but it was there. "Why don't you take them back to your house? I'll take care of things here," Connor said gently. The homeowner understood, putting his arms around the couple and guiding them toward the door. It took a moment for the parents to be ushered out of the house, the mother's sobs echoing as they left. Then Connor was alone with the sound of banging from down the hall. "Come on, man, you know she's one of those things. But how? She wasn't bitten, was she?" Connor said to himself. Connor began thinking through the situation, trying to make sense of it. No reports of the family being attacked. The mother said she'd been sick before bed. He shook his head because it was difficult to believe. She was sick. Could that be it? Connor wondered aloud. The implications were terrifying. If people could turn without being bitten, just from being sick, then nowhere was truly safe. But he shook his head, putting all thought out of his mind in an attempt to focus on the task at hand. He finally got himself moving, his feet feeling like lead as he walked down the hallway. He stopped outside the door. It was painted pink with flower stickers on it. A nameplate read, "Emma's Room," in glittery letters. The creature on the other side thrashed about violently, smacking its hands and head against the door, trying to break through it. Each impact shook the door in its frame. Connor could see where the repeated impacts were taking their toll. The cheap hollow core door was beginning to crack under the assault, splinters appearing around the handle. He raised his handgun, aiming at head height for a child, making sure that the ghoul was keeping its routine down. The impacts were predictable. Bang, 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 always in the same spot. After the third straight head strike in the same spot, he cocked the hammer back, the click sounding impossibly loud in the hallway. He spoke softly, though he knew the thing beyond the door couldn't understand. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you," Connor whispered. With a deep breath and a trigger squeeze, the creature on the other side of the door fell silent. The banging stopped instantly. A small hole appeared in the door where the bullet had passed through. Then, nothing but silence. Connor stood there for a few moments, the weight of what he'd just done settling on his shoulders. He'd killed a child. No, he'd put down something that used to be a child. There was a difference, he told himself, though it didn't make him feel any better. He only moved when he heard Owen calling out from the front door. "Connor, are you okay?" Owen called. "Jesus Christ, man! Do you ever follow directions?" Connor replied, his frustration a welcome distraction from what he'd just done. "It's all right. A few of the neighbors showed up. and they've started to reinforce the front gate, Owen explained. Connor nodded as he made his way out of the hallway, deliberately not looking at the family photos as he passed them. Is she? Owen began. Yeah, man, she was one of those things, Connor confirmed. But how? Owen asked. I don't know for sure, but her mom said that she was sick yesterday, Connor said. We need to check with every house, make sure nobody else is sick, Owen said urgently. I hate to alarm people, but... Connor began. I'd rather them be alarmed than wake up with one of those things ripping out their throats, Owen said firmly. Connor nodded in agreement as the two men walked toward the front of the house. As they exited, they saw Ruby and Julia coming toward them from down the street. Owen immediately raced over to his girlfriend, embracing her tightly, lifting her slightly off the ground. Are you okay, baby? Julia asked, her hands checking him for injuries. I'm fine, baby, I'm fine, Owen assured her. Connor looked over to Ruby with a smirk, trying to lighten his own mood after the grim task he'd just completed. What, no concern for me? Connor asked. Why would I be concerned, mister? Not even a top 5 dangerous thing tonight, Ruby shot back. Ruby let out a smile as both of them laughed, a much-needed tension break. The sound seemed to break something in the air, making the night feel slightly less oppressive. As they stood there in the front yard, a handful of neighbors began emerging from their houses like cautious animals after a storm. They came in ones and twos, some in robes and slippers, others having thrown on whatever was closest. They gathered in the yard, forming a loose circle. The newcomers began asking questions all at once, voices overlapping, trying to figure out what was happening. A couple of them had gotten calls from Owen or the homeowner, while others had heard the gunshots, then seen people standing around. The murmuring grew louder, panic beginning to edge into their voices. Connor held his hands up, calling for quiet. Everybody, calm down. My name is Connor, and I'm going to tell you what's going on, Connor announced. The crowd quieted, all eyes turning to him. He could see the fear in their faces, the confusion, the desperate need for someone to explain why their quiet neighborhood had turned into a war zone. Before I do, however, I need a few of the men to go with Owen here to the front gate. People are securing it as we speak, and they're going to need help, Connor said. Owen pointed to a couple of the men he recognized from the neighborhood, motioning for them to follow. 3 men stepped forward, and they headed off toward the gate. The rest of the group pressed closer to Connor, waiting. Now, what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard for you to believe, and I'll warn you now, it's not good. But you have my word that I'm going to do what I can to keep you all safe, Connor said. It's true, I wouldn't be here without him, Ruby added, stepping closer to Connor in support. Owen and I wouldn't be here either, Julia confirmed. The group stepped in even closer, taking the 2 women's word as validation. Connor looked around at them, maybe 15 people total, a mix of ages from 20s to 60s. Everyone in the crowd stared at him expectantly, waiting for answers, for leadership, for hope. It was quickly dawning on him that even though the night had started with him on a routine bodyguard job for an ungrateful client, it had turned into something far greater than that. These people were looking to him to save them, to protect them, to lead them through the nightmare, and despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the horror and the weight of it all, he knew he would try. The end.